Ready when you are.
Great, thank you so much for joining us at the Broadband Advisory Council. We have some new members here, and it's exciting to have a new group and be together again. If you would like to call the roll?
Yes, happy to, Madam Chair. Delegate Herring. Here. Delegate Leftwich. Are you online with us? Delegate Leftwich?
I'm
Delegate.
here. Can you hear me?
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Do me
Yes,
a minute to find my mic. I'm mute.
Delegate Srinivasan is joining us. Going to be.
Yes, sir. I'm here present. I'll be there in a few minutes.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Willett. Senator Boysko. Senator Hashmi.
I'm here.
Just the FYI, I'm getting a real echo. I'm not sure what the origin is.
Thank you. We're going to work on that. It's in the projector. Not sure that's happening. We'll work on that internally.
I'm not sure.
Ray Lemira.
Here.
Casey Logan.
Here.
Rich Schulman.
Here.
Jimmy Carr.
Here.
Christian Goodwin.
Here.
Christy Proctor.
Here.
Secretary Merrick.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And Secretary Lohr or Representative.
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. Thank you, Secretary. We have a unanimous attendance, Madam Chair.
If our new members would like to just from, and if you are a legislator, what district you represent, I certainly welcome it. If we could start with Delegate Herring right here.
Charnel Herring, I'm the House Delegate, so also as Majority Leader in the House. Been in 15 years, and I represent Alexandria City in Bailey's Crossroads area.
Great, thank you. Is Delegate Willett?
Yes, good morning. I'm Delegate Rodney Willett, and I serve in the House of Delegates for the 58th District, which is most of Western Henrico. Delighted to be with you. I think one of the hats I wear is related to healthcare, particularly rural healthcare right now, and a lot of discussions around broadband. And so I'm killing a couple birds with one stone and being here today, and I'm delighted to be on this.
I understand that Senator Hackworth and Senator Newman are online. Senator Hackworth, if you'd like to just say hello briefly. Senator Hackworth? And if he's having trouble, perhaps Delegate Srinivasan would like to say hello.
Good morning. I'm Delegate Srinivasan. I represent Loudoun County, District 26, running from Brambleton to South Riding. I also serve in the Rural Health Committee, the Select Committee on Rural Health. So I'm really excited to be part of this council. And my interest and angle is the use of this technology to broaden the rural health and telemedicine. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if Senator Hackworth can just say hello briefly, that'd be great. And then we'll proceed with the meeting.
Madam Chair, I believe we may have Representative Senator Hackworth online, so if he's able to join, perhaps we can do that.
Thank you so much. Excellent. So first on our agenda, we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. And if I have on the
I'll make them.
in a second.
Second.
Thank you. Excuse me, I just dropped my name tag. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. The minutes are approved. Any abstentions? Okay. Today we have two people who are going to give us some remarks. First, we have the librarian of Virginia, Dennis Clark. If you'd like to come up and speak to us, we'd certainly appreciate hearing from you.
Madam Chair, should I use this podium or here? Great.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Central Rappahannock Regional Library on behalf of myself as a librarian of Virginia and Martha Hutzel, the library director for the regional library, who unfortunately will not be able to be with us this morning. I'm honored to be able to address you today. In my role, I also bring you the greetings and the welcomes from the library board, the state board that oversees the policy directives of the Library of Virginia and has a responsibility for advocating and supporting public libraries throughout the state. Virginia libraries, public, school, academic of all kinds, have been on the front lines of digital equity and access for nearly 25 years. I was reminded the other day of the very first transformational amount of money that came to the state to deal with digital equity and access came from the Gates Foundation in 2000. So we've been having these discussions and encouraging digital equity and access for over 25 years. The original Gates grant was $3 million. Microsoft matched it with $2 million, and the libraries throughout the state used it to train, to put library to computers, printers, and at that time something still fairly unusual was the internet throughout libraries throughout Virginia. Since that time, Virginia libraries have received other grants from federal agencies, from the Gates Foundation, from other foundations in order to increase and support digital access throughout the state. Today, Virginia libraries remain in the thick of bridging that digital divide. At a policy level, the Library of Virginia continually advocates to expand access to broadband service with our state and national peers, state and national organizations like the American and the Virginia Library Associations, and by our direct connections and advocating with federal agencies, the Federal Communications Commission, and elsewhere. But it's the Virginia public libraries like Central Rappahannock that do most of the real work. These community libraries allow users to check out mobile hotspots, for instance, effectively taking broadband access to places where wiring just does not exist. Augusta County, for example, has 30 mobile hotspots for checking out. I checked this morning, I checked their catalog. All 30 of them are either checked out right now or there are people that are waiting for the next. And there are 52 holds on those 30 hotspots. What libraries do in supporting this kind of access at that last mile is extremely important. During the COVID pandemic, libraries throughout Virginia used ARPA and CARES funding. An example of one of the ways that we enhanced digital access at that time happened in the Petersburg library system, where they created a public library tech bus. So they would drive the tech bus, and they still do, through areas throughout the Petersburg area, with computers on board, with training at that bus, so they could take the library to those places, and had Wi-Fi access. So if you were within 300 feet of that bus, you were able to get on the Petersburg library internet. It is literally a bookmobile for the digital age. These are extremely effective ways that public libraries throughout the state have been bridging that last mile problem of broadband access. The Library of Virginia, the Virginia Library Association, we're continuing to advocate for using E-rate funding to continue to enhance and support these kinds of programs now that the pandemic level funding has dried up. I'll end my remarks with this. There are 134 municipal, community, regional, county libraries throughout Virginia, and in total there's 351 library buildings in those systems. Virginia libraries are deeply involved, they're deeply knowledgeable about their communities, and they stand ready, willing, and able with their expertise, with their experience to continue the work of broadband equity, and are ready and to work with this council, DHCD, and any state or federal agency that's willing to join us to enhance digital equity and digital access. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. I really appreciate your comments. And I think we all agree that the library system is such a digital piece of our infrastructure. Thank you. Next, we will hear from the director of DHCD, Brian Horn, who will give us some comments as well.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a real brief moment and kind of set the stage for some of the things we'll be hearing details on today. Let's just start with number one. CNBC ranked Virginia the top state to do business. Okay? When you burrow into those rankings, you see infrastructure, as mentioned, and broadband specifically is one of the call outs. And so it's a recognition of the good work that Virginia's done. Virginia's been a leader, will stay a leader. And it's an honor and pleasure to serve with this team to do that. Also, under Governor Youngkin's leadership, Virginia was the first state to file its full initial proposal with NTIA. Our proposal has been approved through 3 weeks ago. So we're honing in now on locations that we're going to need to serve with the BEAD program. That's $1.48 billion that we'll get to the town. So later you'll hear about production numbers. You'll hear about the BEAD program. You'll hear about Make Ready, which was a new initiative that passed this year. You'll hear about digital opportunity. I just want to take a moment to kind of set that stage, but also recognize this team. It's a great team, and led by Dr. Chandler. We have members of the team here as well. And it's through the leadership of the Governor and Secretary Merrick that we've been able to, with the help of all of our partners, to make these sorts of strides. So I believe Secretary Merrick, I believe you have a couple comments as well.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks to the team and this advisory council. The broadband community in Virginia is energized, and just wanted to share a brief anecdote again to thank Dr. Holmes and her team, that as the governor is traveling throughout the country, and he works very closely on a bipartisan basis with governors from across the United States, and he continually hears how much his peer governors admire the work that we're doing in broadband. And that's such an important little anecdote for everyone to know. And I wanted to share that with you all and to thank you once again. And also thanks to the library, the Virginia Library, all of the work that you're doing and for hosting us today.
So, Madam Chair, we really appreciate all the work of this council, and look, I'm sure you look forward to hearing some details in the upcoming presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Director. It is a pleasure to be with you all, and I just want to echo the comments. When I got on this commission in 2016, we had $1 million to spend. It was kind of a shoestring program, and we are best in the country, and everywhere I go around the country I hear the same remarks, that Dr. Holmes and her team are really second to none in leading the charge, and so it's just a real honor to be a part of that. I jumped the gun and already got the minutes approved, but just trying to be efficient. So the next thing is the exciting work that we're going to hear from Dr. Holmes, who is the director of the Office of Broadband, who will give us an update on a variety of issues that we have been working on this past year. If you'd like to take the mic.
Sure. And so I'm just basically going to do an overview of this morning's discussion. You'll have a chance to hear from Chandler, Caroline, and Caleb, who are members of the Office of Broadband team. And so really just want to, as Brian said, kind of set the stage of what's going on in terms of the Office of Broadband. And so you'll hear an update this morning on the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative, which is our last mile deployment program. You'll also hear about our new Virginia Make Ready initiative that will be, I think it's official, right? Yeah. Officially open now. And then also the forthcoming $1.48 billion we will receive through the Broadband Equity and Access and Deployment Program. So you hear specific details. There's been a lot of moving parts to the BEAD program, and we have really exciting updates for the council this morning. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about our Digital Opportunity Program. We've had some significant updates regarding that program as well. And so I'm just going to briefly kind of go over a couple of slides this morning that are in your packet. We do have new members of the Broadband Advisory Council, and we're excited to have you all join us. And so we just want to kind of do a real quick snapshot of the council, of kind of what broadband is, where we've been, and where we're going. And so the council is made up of 17 members, which include both members of the General Assembly, both the House and Senate. It also includes 6 citizen members or association representatives who are represented here this morning, and then 4 ex officio members, which typically include a secretariat like Agriculture and Commerce and Trade, and it is staffed by our agency.
For the council members, we're on slide 9.
Oh, slide 9, thank you. And so kind of what is broadband? I like to pick on Brian. He talks about broadband as really where broadband is and where it isn't, but we talk about the transmission of bandwidth data over high-speed internet connection. For those of you who are a Gen Xer like me, you probably started out with dial-up. We still, of course, we have families in Virginia that do have dial-up in our rural communities, and it goes all the way up to fiber. And so you hear a lot about the technology later on as we discuss the BEAD program and kind of where Body has started and where it's going. And so currently in the Commonwealth, if you have access to the internet at 100 megabits per second down and 20 megabits per second upload, you're considered to be served by broadband. And so download, of course, means the data you receive in, and then upload is the data that you actually send out. And so And a location is considered unserved by the internet if your speed is lower than that speed at your facility, business, or home. Next slide. And so Virginia has, at this point, because of access to additional federal funds, had the opportunity to look at broadband in a holistic method in terms of digital divide. And so we as a state has primarily focused on the access side. Of course, no access to broadband infrastructure, you really can't focus on affordability or adoption. And so now we're starting through the funding through the Digital Equity Act, which is funded through NTIA, as well as the body program and BEAD. We're starting to touch all three of those circles that you see on your slide this morning. And so we're moving slowly from infrastructure. We've got, and I don't want to steal the team's thunder and give you information on where we know we have to go, but we're currently building out to almost 400,000 locations through current investments through body. And so we're checking access off the list as we keep moving along through both body and what will be ultimately BEAD. But we also are looking at ways to address affordability and adoption. And so access to broadband is available, but folks can't afford it. And then around adoption, services there, but folks don't necessarily have the wherewithal to understand how to utilize the internet. When we conducted our statewide digital opportunity survey, gosh, that was last summer, what we heard from residents across the Commonwealth were that they may have had access. They didn't understand about the resources that were available around affordability. At that time, the Affordable Connectivity Program was still in operation. And so folks weren't aware of the program, how to enroll in the program. They weren't aware of Lifeline, which is another subsidy program offered at the federal level. And they also didn't have the confidence. They lacked confidence to actually get on the internet and use it. And so we heard a lot around folks were uncomfortable with logging on and doing a telehealth or telemedicine visit, or folks were uncomfortable with just learning how to set up an email account. And so through some of our resources, in addition to the survey, we did some pilot projects across the state, which included some of our library partners. Smith County Library was one of them, where we're building out a regional project in the counties of Washington, Wythe, and Smith counties in Southwest Virginia. And Smith County Library, who had already started working with their residents on digital navigation skills during COVID, utilized some funding from our office to expand that program where they physically were going in the homes of residents as they were literally getting broadband through body to teach them how to turn on their computer, how to set up an email account, and how to walk through the internet and trying to do their everyday tasks. The next thing I'll talk about really is broadband access. And so of course we have resources through body, and Kelly, you can kind of go to the next slide. We also have the Line Extension Customer Assistance Program, which is a program that's supporting what we call a drop. And so the drop, basically, if you live in a rural community, which I know several folks on this council do, or have constituents that live in rural parts of the state, you may call your cable company. You do have access to service. However, it may cost you $15,000 to get the service from the road to your front door. That is the purpose of the Line Extension Customer Assistance Program. And then there's additional federal funding that different providers or entities across the state can seek, such as the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund or funding through USDA. And then lastly, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. As Senator Boysko said earlier, I remember being around when Body was created with $1 million program. I thought I was going to work myself out of a job in a couple of years, and then lo and behold, BEAD happened. And so I'll be around for a little bit longer. And so it's exciting to literally be in an opportunity where you see the fruits of your labor every day, talking to folks who didn't have access to broadband, who maybe didn't have a device, and seeing them, improve their educational opportunities. We have some great stories we shared in our broadband newsletter that was recently created by Kayla in our office and the digital opportunity team to really share stories about how folks are getting access and how it's impacted their lives. And then I also want to talk a little bit about a partnership we have with the Rural Center of Virginia and Christie's team to really look at, there was a bill passed last session that was signed by Governor Youngkin to have a definition of rural and add the rural layer to the broadband map, which we'll talk about shortly. Next couple of slides. And so we heard me talk a little bit about the ACP program. Many providers in Virginia do offer a low-cost plan. Many residents were unaware of that during our survey results. And then we also look at exploring partnerships with other organizations to address affordability. You heard the librarian of Virginia talk about hotspots. I heard a lot about that at a recent conversation in Chesterfield, how there is high demand and low supply in a lot of the libraries because there's a huge need and folks are using it to access the internet. I won't steal Chandler's thunder, but if you live in a rural community and you have a hotspot, you may also not be able to use it because you don't have the access to cell service, which is used to operate the service as well. And so again, really looking at access, affordability. And the last slide I'll go over in terms of adoption is really looking at, how do we offer digital skills training through online platforms? As stated earlier, the libraries have performed digital literacy programs for years. Digital navigation pilot programs are going on across the state. And then B, through what is called the non-deployment funding, there's one bucket, but there are two distinct uses of that funding. One, the first priority is to get broadband to everyone. And the second one is once you've done that, if you have excess funds, which we anticipate we will, it's going into a bucket called non-deployment funds. And so that's where we'll be able to look at adoption and affordability issues and addressing those across the state. And so what are we doing in Virginia about broadband? Well, we're funding private-public partnerships to extend infrastructure to the unserved across the state. We're on a daily basis monitoring and evaluating projects that are going on all the way from the Eastern Shore to the mountains of Southwest Virginia. And then we assist communities as well with broadband planning to not only receive funds through our office, but also to access funding that's available through the federal government. And so the last piece is leveraging other federal grant opportunities. You'll hear later on today, while we're also standing up our digital opportunity grant program, the federal government through NTIA has actually launched their competitive program. And so some of our partners across the state are looking at that funding as well. And so we provide support in those applications as well. And then the last thing is to really have an understanding around broadband affordability and adoption. I won't steal Kayla's thunder on her presentation letter, but we do have some resources for every single city and county to prepare digital opportunity plans so that if they already served or 90% of their community is served, how do you look at addressing adoption and affordability? And for our communities that are being built out, how do you start thinking about the next layer around broadband access? And so with that, I will turn it over to Caroline.
Good morning. I'm Caroline Luxoy. I'm the program manager for the Office of Broadband. For those of you who joined us virtually for the Broadband Advisory Council, you'll know that we had some issues with the sound. So we apologize for the technical difficulties, but I am re-recording my slides so that we can insert them into the presentation. And I'm going to be providing an update on our flagship program, the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative, and give you an idea of where we are and how we're doing. So what you're looking at here is a look at all the VADI funding years. So the Virginia Telecommunication Initiative started in FY17 from FY17 to FY23, we received 235 applications, which amounted to over $1.2 billion in requested funds. We have awarded $935 million, and through private and local match, we have leveraged $1.2 billion. When these projects are all said and done, they will amount to over 388,000 locations in the various project areas. And this is a total of 87 projects awarded across 80 localities. If we were to pull out just one of those funding years, just to take a look at just what 1 year looks like, for FY23, we received 35 applications from 50 different localities, which amounted to over $302.1 million in requested funds. Keeping in mind that our state allocation for this year was about $50 million, so obviously well oversubscribed. We awarded $59.5 million, which included a letter of intent pulling from FY24. Through local and private match, we leveraged $118.6 million. We welcomed 5 new localities to the VADI program, and just this funding year will amount to about 27,771 new connections. In June, Governor Youngkin announced our most recent round of VADI award winners for FY24. So just looking at our latest round, we received 25 applications from 39 localities, still oversubscribed with a total request of $137.6 million. We awarded $41.6 million, we are leveraging $75.7 million. And then when this funding year is all said and done, we will have achieved 18,554 new connections. So looking at our most recent round of VATI awardees, in the left-hand column, you have our list of applicants, so our list of awardees. And then in the middle column, their designated partners, so their ISP. And then on the far right are the localities that will be impacted by these projects. Our new folks this year are Allegheny and Rockbridge. And here's a look at all of our VATI awardees since 2021. And we're starting with 2021 here rather than all the way back in FY 17, because 21 is when we started mandating shapefiles. So we had much better mapping information. So between the projects between 21 and 23 are all in blue here. And then our new folks, the 24 folks, are in purple. So you can see we're very widespread. We're proud of how wide-reaching our program has been, from the coal fields to the Eastern Shore. We've touched just about everybody. Still a couple holdouts, but we have a plan for those folks as well. So this is the where are we slide. So a list of our current portfolio of VATI projects. You can see everything is complete up until 2021. We still have 7 projects open and active in from FY21. Important to note here are FY22 projects, and those were the projects that a great number of them had received ARPA funding, and ARPA funding has a deadline to be spent by December 31st of 2026. And if those funds are not spent, they're swept. So you can see our FY22 projects, we're starting to have folks close out, which is important. FY23, they're all still open and active, and then FY24, they're all in our pre-contract phase. So again, they are our most recently awarded folks, and so we're working with them to get all of the pre-contract materials submitted, but we hope to have them off and running very soon. So that was our where are we slide. This is our how are we doing slide. You can see in blue are all of the constructed passings for these funding years, and then in orange are the passings that are to be constructed. And this is as of July 2024. So this is still pretty accurate. So I wanted to take an opportunity here to spotlight some of our VATI program or some of our VATI projects. First off, the City of Chesapeake with their partner Cox was our first ARPA funded project to close out. So again, from FY22, a number of projects received ARPA funds. Those have a spending deadline. So the City of Chesapeake was the first to close out, followed by Stafford County. And with their partner Comcast, they were actually contracted at 634 passings, but through private investment ended up with 682 passings. Floyd County with their partner Citizens Telephone, they officially finished extending fiber throughout the county. They do have a 2023 project, which is to address some of the long drop issues, but with their 2022 project, they have finished the fiber spread throughout the county. And then TJPDC with their partner Firefly. This is an exceptionally large project. It spans across 13 counties and has a total of 36,225 total passings. And despite their size, they are on track. And as of July, they have already achieved 13,059 passings. So there was new language added to the FY 25-26 biennium budget this year, all with the intent of ensuring that those FY 22 ARPA funded projects reach their deadline and will achieve all of their passings without having to have money swept. So one of the first things that this new language did was establish the Virginia Make Ready initiative, which Chandler speaks to later. It also directed the Office of Broadband to issue corrective action plans for any ARPA funded project determined to be at risk. And then finally, it outlined options available to these projects to ensure no locations are left without broadband access and without a funding opportunity. So below are those options that were made available to these projects. You have a complete project surrender, a partial project surrender, a project transfer to another ISP, a passing transfer to another VATI funded project, or another solution approved by the Office of Broadband. So taking a second to explain what our definition of risk is. So again, all of this new language is contingent on the eligibility of the project. And what makes the project eligible is, one, they have ARPA funds tied to them. So either through a state allocation or through their local allocation. And they've been determined to be at risk by the Office of Broadband. So what we consider to be at risk, so no risk, a grantee has not requested a contract extension, so they are still on track with their current milestone timeline, and they have not had to extend their project past the original contract end date. Low risk is a grantee that has requested a contract extension and seems to be falling behind on their milestone timeline. And then finally, high risk is any project that has a contractual end date in 2026. So of course, considering the spending deadline of the end of 26, any project that has an end date in 26 has inherent risk tied to it. And we want to make sure that those folks are achieving their contractual obligations in time. And I just wanted to point out also that these definitions are broad intentionally. We wanted to cast a wide net, knowing that folks needed the risk determination in order to be eligible for some of the other solutions and opportunities. So again, keeping in mind that the definitions are broad, here is a look at where our FY22 projects fall. And these are just the ARPA funded projects. So 12 of our FY22 projects are considered not at risk. 21 are considered low risk, and then just one is has been determined to be high risk. So in regards to all of this new language added to the biennium budget, the Office of Broadband reached out to these folks, anybody who is determined to be at any degree of risk, either low or high. In June, we sent them risk letters to inform them of their risk status, and then the new language. So to make them aware that the Virginia Make Ready initiative was going to be made available, in addition to those options that are made available to any project at risk. So 22 projects received a risk determination letter. Now this information is out of date a little bit. So 21 projects now have reaffirmed their project delivery by the contract end date. So they elected to not select any of those options made available to them and to stick with their current contract end date. And then we are currently working with one other project who is looking at one of the options. And again, so the options that we provided in these risk letters to them was to either reaffirm their project delivery, complete project surrender, partial project surrender, project transferred to another ISP and passing transfer to another VADI project or another solution approved by the Office of Broadband. And that concludes my slides, and I believe I'm handing it over to Chandler.
Want to talk a bit about getting into the process of federal programs. Of course, we know there's VADI investments across the Commonwealth through state funding, but there's also prior investments made through programs like the CAF2 auction, through the RDOF auction. These are FCC programs that reverse auctioned off areas and obligated providers to provide service to those areas and counties across the state. We're one of the only states in the country that's now working with providers through what's called the 214 process to transfer those awards to the VADI awarded, generally speaking, the VADI awarded provider in those counties. To not go into details, but actually it is public. So one of them we just helped and contributed to pulling off was that Empower recently adopted the CAF2 obligations in Mecklenburg, Halifax, and a little bit of Brunswick County from River Street Networks. River Street was a previous CAF2 awardee in that area. The counties elected to partner with Empower on a larger VADI project, and thankfully Empower and Casey Logan's team was able to take over that obligation, is going to deliver that CAF2 award now.
And thank y'all for I don't care, I hope this is in line here, but DHCD was a huge help in guiding us through that process, in getting the parties together for this to happen. So thank y'all very much for what you did. Fantastic.
And there's about 5 other instances of those kind of transfers working on, or we're working on at this point. But the FCC team has been incredibly helpful here as well, right? You know, sometimes we like to rail against FCC programs and there's long build-out timelines, but the team at the FCC here has been extremely helpful in making sure that the projects get transferred to providers that can deliver them in that initial window. So working on about 5 of those now, and we'll keep the council posted as those go along. Moving on to slide 27 and the next topic area, we wanted to provide an overview of the Virginia Make Ready initiative. Of course, we've talked about this as being adopted by the Assembly and signed in by the governor into the budget. This past session, $30 million to provide supplements to eligible FY 2022 VADI projects. These projects we have to be determined to be at risk, as Caroline mentioned, to be eligible for this bucket of funding. We can award up to $30,000 per mile for pole replacements, mid-span pole installations, or to take previously planned and aerial infrastructure and then trench that underground if cost exceeds $30,000 per mile. The program, as described by the Assembly and the budget, has to be set up and running and making awards in September next month. We started and opened that application process with the How to Apply webinar on Monday. So we have 30 days of a runway for providers and local governments to submit applications to us by the first deadline of September 12th. We're going to make $7.5 million available per month for the next 4 months. We think that accelerated timeline will move forward projects and accelerate delivery of projects across the state. So looking forward to working with providers and local governments there to get the job done on the Make Ready initiative. The funds, a key rule passed by the Assembly, the funds have to be expended by June 30th, 2025. Not allocated, not obligated, expended. You know, so we have to do this work through the Make Ready initiative by June 30th, 25, or those funds revert back to the general fund. I've covered some of the details here on this slide on 28 now, but just want to highlight a couple of unique things. The Department of Housing Community Development was given the discretion to adopt additional screenings in this application process. We added a couple of those things in. The 3rd and 4th bullet there, you'll find we want to require some skin in the game through this process. There's a 25% match fund requirement for applicants to come into this program. We also have a more rigorous review process. If an applicant comes in and requests more than 10% of the original VADI award amount through the Make Ready initiative. We do have the flexibility to award more dollars than 10% of that original award amount, but the applicant should expect a rigorous review process there to make sure that the Make Ready initiative is funding projects and appropriate with the original award size. Perhaps we can stop there for questions. Yes.
If anybody else has any questions.
Does this require amending the previous contracts or where additional funding may be provided?
So we'll enter into a new agreement with the locality and the provider and manage this as a separate project. And for the folks online, the question was, is the Make Ready initiative going to be an add-on to the existing VADI contract, or is it going to be a separate agreement? And it'll be a separate agreement with the locality and the broadband provider.
I have a question, wondering, have you heard from the providers or the localities about the interest or concerns or?
The question from Chair Boysko was that, have we heard from localities about interest in the program, concerns about the program? We have heard a good bit about the interest in the program. A conversation point when we were providing assistance to localities about making decisions when they received those at-risk letters was availability to apply to the Make Ready initiative, right? Those were hand in hand. The risk determinations were mimicking each other, right? If we determined a locality to be at risk and they were eligible for this program. So we had a lot of those conversations. And I think we're going to see a robust interest in the Make Ready initiative, especially coming in the first month thereafter. And then if an applicant's not successful in the first month, we'll work with them to tune up the application to be more competitive in the next round. So this is a open book test, as body's been over the last few years, and looking forward to working with localities there.
I mean, what we want is we want to use that money thoughtfully, effectively, but it's broadband in the Commonwealth. So.
Absolutely. Just a reminder for folks online to mute themselves, please. And getting into the next topic area, we want to talk about the BEAD program. We've been talking about BEAD for 3 years now. We've just gotten our volume 2 over the finish line. Of course, referring to the 3-year timeline there, the Infrastructure Act was passed back in December of 2021 that contained the BEAD program at the federal level, and it's been making its way through the state planning process. You know, states that didn't have a broadband office before BEAD are moving at the same timeline that we are, based on that federal planning process and structure that they're forcing states to go through to scale up for the BEAD program. So we've just gotten our initial proposal, volume 2, approved a couple weeks back. That was big news for us in Virginia. It outlines what our application process will be. And some key next steps there. So we'll talk about what those are, but for the new members on the council and for the current folks as a refresher, I want to talk briefly on slide 30 about what the BEAD program is. The BEAD program is a federal last mile deployment program that's run through state broadband offices. Nationwide, it's $42.5 billion. Virginia's allocation was $1.48 billion. The priority under that program is that we get to unserved and underserved locations first and provide them access to broadband infrastructure. I'm going to talk about it on later slides, but BEAD also has some interesting opportunity around broadband affordability and adoption programs, and we have some anticipated surplus funds to address those needs as well. Anytime we talk about BEAD, we want to be very clear, and this is on slide 31, about what governs the program, right? For folks in the room, the VADI program is governed by state budget language, General Assembly action signed by the governor, and then guidelines administered by our agency. The BEAD program is significantly more complex than that. Passed back in December 2021, the congressional statute outlined certain requirements for the program. Those were given to the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, to develop what's called a Notice of Funding Opportunity, and then handed off to states to develop program guidelines to extend last mile infrastructure to unserved and underserved areas. Let's talk about timeline. This is a timeline that gets us to this point. We want to just outline the steps we've gone through here to get to this point. I won't go line item by line item, but the thing to drive home is that we've been working through the federal approval process to work our way up to the application window through BEAD. Moving on to slide 33 now. The exciting part, before we can get to the application process, we have to finalize the eligible locations for the BEAD program. I think this is when our stakeholders are particularly interested in seeing when we're going to release these locations, when we get approval from NTIA on those locations. We expect it to be around 100,000 eligible locations around the Commonwealth. We started out that challenge process that we mentioned back at prior Broadband Council meetings with 162,000. We've seen a lot of providers build out recently. We've seen a lot of locations picked up in other funding programs like the Enhanced ACAM auction at the FCC, also the VADI awards that we announced last in the end of July as well. So that number down to 100,000 that we anticipate to be eligible for the BEAD program. These locations are everywhere. We haven't run the analysis about how many cities and counties have eligible locations in them, but when we started this process, the only city county that didn't have a BEAD eligible location was the city of Norton in Southwest Virginia. So we're going to rerun that analysis, make sure we're engaging with counties and cities that haven't been a part of the VADI program in the past that may not realize that there's unserved locations on the BEAD map in their jurisdictions. And the sub-bullets there support that. These are scattered across in urban areas as well as rural areas, as well as in and around VADI projects. On the next slide, we've got a map with a lot of red dots on it. Those red dots are obviously brought up to the size where we can view them on a half piece of paper, but those are the 100,000, give or take, locations that are eligible for the BEAD program across Virginia. You see a lot of red dots there. Just know that sometimes those are in nooks and crannies and they kind of pop and are highlighted through this map process, right? From looking at this map conceptually, if I was to pick it up for the first time, I'd think, wow, there's a lot of work to be done. But in reality, there's 300,000 plus locations already obligated in funding programs that are being built out now. So if you zoom in, and I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide, you can see here in the Cumberland Plateau Planning District Commission out in deep Southwest Virginia, you can see there the red dots represent BEAD eligible locations, and then the teal, light blue dots, and then the blue dots represent where we've currently funded body projects. So this goes to prove the points on a previous slide where there's a lot of BEAD eligible locations because of enhanced mapping efforts that we're finding within the footprints of existing body awards all across the Commonwealth. So we're going to see a lot of edging out of existing body projects to pick up those BEAD locations. Sometimes that'll be with the body partner. Sometimes that may be with another broadband provider that comes in and applies for that program. So we'll keep the council up to date as that application process folds out. But I just want to flag on this slide in particular that we've now, through enhanced mapping, seen the locations and the nooks and crannies that have been left out of previous programs.
Chandler, can you quickly share the difference between BEAD and body in terms of our partnership with the last mile provider?
Certainly, and primarily, as folks in the room are familiar with, the body program, the local government has to be the applicant, and they select the broadband provider they apply for funding with. Under the BEAD program, the broadband providers apply directly to us. That's key distinction number one. I've got a slide in a couple of minutes about how local governments are still going to be involved here. That's key difference number one. Key difference number two, the body program, a county is essentially competing against another county for funding in the application process, right? So that produces some, unfortunately, losers in the process, right? It's a crude word to use, but unsuccessful applicants in the body process. Under the BEAD program, we have broadband providers applying to serve unserved locations in each zip code, right? So we have multiple broadband providers applying to serve the same area. Each one of those zip codes under BEAD will have a winner, to keep with the same crude acronym, successful applicants, to serve those locations. So the BEAD program is structurally different in that way, where folks are applying to serve a defined area rather than us under body competing one county versus another versus another versus another, if that makes sense.
Any questions?
Is there a federal requirement?
There's a lot of federal requirements that we work to communicate through this, and a lot of hand holding and technical assistance to come with broadband providers to navigate those federal rules there. Getting into the details of the application process, and again, this application process cannot begin until we get those locations approved. We'll have a 150-day application window. The first 60 are for the broadband providers to submit us a letter of intent stating their qualifications and where they plan to apply under the BEAD program. The second 90-day window is for providers to prepare those full applications and submit all that narrative. Right now, all of the questions and required certifications and documents, all those requirements are available on our website, right? So this is a longer runway even than this 150-day application window says. Those documents are all public now once our Volume 2 got approved in late July. On the next slide, it still presents the same map of Matthews County. That Matthews County map is just there to show folks what the average county might look like under the BEAD program. We're going to again, have application areas set as zip codes with scattered BEAD eligible locations throughout those zip codes.
Chandler, can you just clarify, so each of these dots is actually a household or an individual business?
Yes, ma'am.
So you were saying house by house by house that.
Mm-hmm. That's right. The question from Chair Boysko was that the dots on the map, are those homes, are they businesses? The answer is yes. Those red dots on the map we're currently presenting in Matthews County are homes, businesses. Some of them are community anchor institutions that will reach with gig symmetrical connectivity under BEAD. So again, another technicality that we can get into, but there's a lot of layers to this BEAD onion that we're working to work with stakeholders to get through.
So if I'm a provider and I want to do that, I'll show you how I'm going to do the requirements. Bring broadband to every one of these parts. Some of the parts, you can still submit an application I can do this piece of Matthews County?
So the question in the room is, when a provider submits an application, are they submitting an application on literally all of those red dots in that zip code? The response there is that at least 95% of the dots in the zip codes have to be included in a provider's proposal to us. We expect this program to, foot the bill for a lot of high-cost areas to get internet service out to the far-reaching spots of each one of these zip codes, each one of these counties. So at least 95%. For the 5% that may not be included, we'll have a second small round and then directly engage providers if we can get potentially fiber, but also fixed wireless and satellite service to those locations.
And there's a fiber preference to BEAD.
Yeah, structurally, we have to consider fiber first by the federal rules.
The bidding provider follows. The bidding provider has to provide a plan to have 95%.
Yes.
At least.
That's right. The slide also outlines what the scoring criteria are established under BEAD. A lot of these scoring criteria and the weights were preset by federal rules, but you can see how that breaks down here. I'll highlight a couple of key pieces. The city-county letter of support piece of this is going to be really critical in a provider's application to us. We are asking that if a city or county wants to provide a letter of support to an applicant, they can choose to do so. They may want to attach specific conditions to that of the winning provider and their locality, but that letter of support is not meaningless. It's going to be worth almost 10 points in the application process. We've run a lot of scoring scenarios through the BEAD program, and we believe that 10 points is going to be incredibly meaningful when it comes to making or breaking an application under BEAD. So local governments are going to be really critical throughout this process, even though we're required to directly engage with broadband providers and applications. I'm going to turn a little bit here now to the affordability and adoption piece of this. BEAD non-deployment. BEAD non-deployment is, as it sounds, providing funding for state broadband offices to do activities other than deploying broadband infrastructure to areas. We refer to this generally as broadband affordability and adoption. Some folks also loop in digital literacy to this. Called a lot of things, but we're going to get into the eligible uses of those funds and kind of our plan so far to bring those and make wise investments in the non-deployment area. So once we've made sure that we have enough funding devoted to solve the infrastructure gap, we can invest these non-deployment dollars. So far, we've had conversations with over 25 other state agencies across Virginia to talk about non-deployment partnerships, broadband adoption programs. I won't go into the details because I don't want to commit our partners to anything at this stage, right? We're having workshops, we're fleshing out the details. It's no secret that we're obviously working with the libraries to see what potential partnership opportunities are here, and I know they're looking forward to that and scaling up there. Cindy Church with the libraries has been a strong advocate for this for multiple years, and we're looking forward to working with them. We'll perhaps be able to get into the details about partnerships and programs at the next council meeting or provide that as a written update at the time. But we're going everywhere with this, right? In terms of state agency partnerships, working with the disability-oriented agencies like Department of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Department of Blind and Vision Impaired, but also folks that you may not think of in the broadband space, Department of Conservation and Recreation, Department of Wildlife Resources. Again, don't want to commit our partners to anything. Nobody's signed on any dotted lines yet, but we look forward to working with those agencies to talk about broadband adoption programs. In addition to that, state agency partnership division of this, we're also exploring other programs that we can get into. We expect that a portion of our non-deployment funding will also be available to scale up what we're going to fund under the Digital Equity Act Capacity Grant Program. Kayla, our colleague, is going to talk about that in a couple of slides. Here are the eligible uses. Senator Boysko was a key part of this during the past General Assembly session and adopting language in the budget that provided that DHCD can invest funding based on these eligible uses as outlined in the BEAD program. So thank you for that. To summarize things, there's a lot of work to be done still on deploying broadband infrastructure. We're going to get to the 100,000 locations and make sure they're included in funded projects under BEAD. Want to highlight specifically for accountability purposes all around 2 counties that we're keeping our eye on where the most BEAD eligible locations are Carroll County and Grayson County. Carroll County has twice more unserved locations than any other locality in the Commonwealth, 9,096 eligible locations in Carroll that we're still working on getting a solution for and will do under the BEAD program. Grayson County is the second most eligible locations across Virginia, almost 4,500 locations that are eligible across Grayson County. that are in need of broadband access and don't have funding already to get to them. We're still building out the work around broadband adoption and non-deployment, and a lot of that will tail in with digital equity programs that are on the next few slides. Happy to take questions.
Yes, are there questions?
For council members online, perhaps, any questions from council members online?
We have it.
Okay, well,
What's the timeline for the BEAD program? Are there hard timelines?
the question in the room was, what is the timeline on the BEAD program? A lot of the timeline is iterative based on when we get approval from the federal government to do certain things. I can answer with certainty that we have to select our awardees by the time we submit what's called our final proposal. That final proposal has to be sent in by July of 2025, 1 year from when it got approved. We're working on doing it much quicker than that, though. So we hope to be able to get that final proposal in quicker, much quicker than that 2025 deadline.
So final proposal for all 100,000 locations?
That's correct. The question in the room was, does that final proposal have to include awardees for all those 100,000 locations? The answer is yes. The structure of the program, nationwide, all 50 states have to find a solution for those eligible locations by that final proposal deadline.
July.
For us, yes.
And this brings us back to the point, Delegate, that the BEAD program is going to be a nationwide infusion of funds across the broadband industry, right? So what we've been working through in Virginia over the last 3 years now with American Rescue Plan funding investments, other states are now going to start to experience and have to work through those same processes to scale up to meet the demand for broadband infrastructure. So we're with a lot of other states. We're not, I guess we are offering free consulting in that aspect, but we tout a lot of the work that the Assembly's done and the Governor has done to streamline the progress of these investments. So happy to continue to share that success and leverage what we've learned over the last 3 years to get to the last 100,000.
Other question, Chancellor, is you said between Marty and BEAD, local governments are not delivering voting rights. How do you envision involving local?
So the question is, how can local governments be involved under BEAD? They will be involved through that letter of support mechanism. The broadband providers will be coming to local governments throughout the BEAD application process to ask for a letter of support. That's worth 10 points in the process. 10% of all the points in the process. Yep, so they're going to be involved there. We're also engaging local governments, and this is a good cue up for our next part of the presentation, is through the Affordability and Adoption Planning Grant Program. So similar to how we started with broadband infrastructure planning back in 2016, 2017 through BOTP, we're also having opportunities now for local governments to engage around affordability and adoption and plan and scale up to meet that non-deployment need in their jurisdiction. So, Madam Chair, if there aren't any other questions, I'll turn it over to our colleague Kayla.
Anybody online? I know this is a lot of information, especially if you're new to the council, but the providers and the local government have been working on this for years and years, and we've been in conversation with the federal government for a number of years. I think I started talking with Senator Warner's office in 2019, early 2020. So this has been something that we've known has been coming, and the stakeholders been at the table this whole time too. So.
And I will add, we do have, as Chandler said, we've posted information on our agency website. We've provided sample letters that localities can review with their county attorney or city attorney and decide how they want to partner with a provider in submitting that letter of support.
All right. Okay, I don't have to lean forward or anything. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kayla Bravo. I'm one of the interns here at the Office of Broadband. I mainly shadow and support Cameron Lewis, our Digital Opportunity Coordinator. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it today, so I'll be presenting available digital opportunity programs in the Commonwealth. We're going to go through 3 programs: the Virginia Affordability and Adoption Planning Grant Program, the Capacity Grant Program. These 2 programs are going to be administered directly by the Office of Broadband, and then we have the Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, which is administered by the NTIA. So the first program is the Virginia Affordability and Adoption Planning Grant Program. Long word, I just call it VAPG for short, skip that second A. This program is eligible applicants are cities, counties, and tribal governments. They're going to get $25,000 reserved for each locality to create their own digital opportunity plan. As you all may know, Virginia created their own digital opportunity plan last year, but this is going to give localities a chance to create their own specific targeted implementation strategies to address those specific issues within their communities. So localities can apply themselves, or they can have a joint application. If there were 2 localities, it would be 50K, 3 localities, 75, and so on. And then you can also partner with planning district commissions, consultants, or regional councils to manage the plan and actually conduct the assessments and everything. Part of the eligible uses of fundings are needs assessments, asset inventories, local coordination, pilot or case studies if you're ahead of the curve, and increasing organizational capacity, and of course awareness initiatives. And then I have some sample uses like creating your own program, a pilot or case study. Oh yeah. So here is an applicant status of what we have right now. We opened the program in April, and so far we have 4 completed applications. 3 are going to be Matthews County, City of Virginia Beach, and City of Portsmouth. And they did their own individual applications. And then we have Prince Edward, which decided to do a joint consortium application with the Orange County surrounding it. And they're going to be managed by the Commonwealth Regional Council. And then we have incomplete applications that are in the process of getting completed. We have the Floyd, Montgomery, Radford, Pulaski, and Giles County, and they're going to be managed by the New River Valley Regional Commission. And then we have Albemarle in that area, which I think is going to be the lead applicant for that. And then we have counties in conversation. These are counties and localities that have reached out to us seeking technical assistance. They're interested in applying. So that's going to be Fairfax, Arlington, Prince William, and then Lancaster. So hopefully they apply soon. Like I said, we opened the program in April. We accept applications on a rolling basis, the 15th of every month, and then we're intending to stop accepting applications in the end of the calendar year in December.
Not to be a salesperson, but this is $25,000 available in planning funds to any city and county in Virginia that applies and clears the standards in the application process to look into these needs in their jurisdiction. So if you're not on this map, we want you on this map. Submit us an application, come talk to our office with Kayla and Cam and the digital equity team to get the ball rolling there.
Yeah, a lot of counties.
Yeah, we set aside planning dollars for all of them, $3.125 million.
Yep, so take advantage of, you have a right to that money, take advantage, reach out to us and we'll help you along the way. The next programs that we have are digital equity programs administered by the NTIA. As you guys may know, Virginia had money to do a digital equity state planning plan. We call it the Digital Opportunity Plan. It was released late last year. But now we're in the process of our state capacity grant. This is a way for us to really implement what issues we found in the state digital opportunity plan. So right now we're going and talking to stakeholders in the program development stage, figuring out what's needed, the sub-grant experience, and then the sub-grantor experience and the sub-grantee experience. We want to make it as easy for our sub-grantees as possible so they're not over capacity, not overwhelmed. So we're at that stage right now. And then while we're in that stage, NTIA also released their Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program. And this is a program where organizations and stakeholders can apply directly for digital opportunity and digital equity funding. So let's go one by one. We have the State Capacity Grant Program. The Office of Broadband submitted our application on May 28th, and we're currently awaiting comments and approval. We're hopeful that we'll get approval within the next 30 days. So that's exciting. Virginia was allocated $18.3 million in our first wave allocation. It's going to be 3 waves of money throughout the period throughout the program. We're going to reserve $3.5 million for this thing that we call the DORT tool. It's going to be the Virginia Digital Opportunity Resource Tool. This is going to be a centralized hub online, a one-stop shop where people can go and see what resources are available regarding digital opportunity, whether that's trainings, device refurbishment centers where they can send in their laptops to get fixed, other places where they can buy low cost, maybe free laptops if they're eligible for it. And then we also have a digital opportunity awareness initiatives, and that's going to be a kind of a locale toolkit. So localities can host their own digital navigation nights and kind of promote and encourage broadband awareness and the benefits that broadband can bring to your daily life. And then we also propose the idea of a mobile broadband bus, which we would kind of gut and make into a living room with like Alexa or Siri, just so people can really understand the benefits that broadband brings in, not only like in work, but also in their home, and because it's really incorporated in every part of your life.
We can't take credit for that idea. That actually came from the electric cooperatives. Casey, actually in his prior role, the cooperatives, and Casey, I'll let you explain it because I don't want to like screw it up. Because it's really hard. I know how I want to do it for broadband, but you were the catalyst in your previous role. And I know the cooperatives as a whole have done this around electricity.
That's great. We call it the cooperative living room. So basically stage an area, and we work with libraries as well. The library partners, in the counties we did to partner with them to really bring in residents of that county to show them, to do a lot of this digital equity and digital learning that they could do with laptops and smart TVs. We found that especially our older demographics very intimidated by streaming TV. They're so used to remote control, turn it on, change the channel. That's really intimidating for them. But getting them the feel of it, showing them how you can do it, it really takes a lot of that uncertainty away from them, and it helps them be more amenable for the adoption of the technology. And a huge success, a huge opportunity, I think, throughout the state to have these type of centers put up, and I'll offer the assistance of the electric co-ops if we, you'd like for us to help and support or do a test case again on other type of ideas, we can well do that. We'll work with DHCD to come up with ideas.
Thank you. I can't say we came up with the idea. I saw the sensor that was put in Dinwiddie County, and I was like, man, could we do a mobile one? And then I knew the libraries or counties had partnered during COVID, and so we did set aside funding. We have to get approved by NTA, but we did propose to have mobile units available across the state.
I have another question. Are organizations outside of governments and providers eligible for these grants? So like the NAACP or groups that focus on people who are at the lower level of the
Yes.
economic or non-English native speakers?
So the question was from Senator Boysko if this application or if these programs are eligible only for localities or broadband providers. It's going to be open to a motley of organizations, whether they're community anchor institutions, nonprofits, etc. It's in one of the later slides, so we'll go up to that. But besides those 3.5 million, we're also going to have 14.5 million for an actual sub-grant program that we called the Digital Skills Literacy and Distribution Sub-Grant Program, DSLD for short. It's going to tackle 4 main purposes of digital opportunity: digital skills and literacy programs, like trainings, self-paced courses, online courses, etc. Digital navigation and tech support, that's hiring a digital navigator maybe with the library to go to actual homes and help install or use a laptop, etc. Just tech support in all that way. Then we have device refurbishment and distribution programs. This is where maybe a private donor would donate their laptops or digital devices to a refurbisher, and then they would be distributed at a free or low cost to community members in the community. And then we have targeted efforts for covered populations, specific efforts that you can't really address with these other 3 buckets. It's going to go to targeted efforts.
And so to your question earlier, Senator Boysko, this is the 14.5 is a grant program we'll run directly. And so eligible applicants would be, as Kayla said, we'll run the gamut from local nonprofits, libraries, schools, typically anyone that would be eligible for a traditional, what I would consider a public service program would be eligible.
Yeah, and with these eligible applicants, we really want to make sure that it's flexible, whether it's like there have been previous projects where banks have created privacy booths so that local community members can go and have telehealth appointments if they don't want to go all the way to their doctor's office. So it's really flexible, really broad. We really want to encourage anyone that can help in any way. The third program that we have is the NTIA Digital Equity Competitive Program. This is the third program of the digital equity programs administered by NTIA, and this is an opportunity for organizations to apply directly to NTIA and federal funding. Here's a list of eligible applicants. You can see it's political subdivisions, foundations, corporations, institutions, community anchor institutions, local educational agencies, workforce agencies, the list goes on. And then of course, NTIA and we as well always want to encourage and promote a partnership between any of these entities. Coordination is awesome. So if we can have that, that would be great. And then the competitive program is $1.25 billion of federal funding available. And then they're expecting to have 5 to 12 million award amounts, and that there is a 10% match requirement. This can be in cash or in-kind contributions through the services that you get through the program. And then NTIA is going to support the 5 eligible uses of funding, whether that's developing and implementing digital inclusion activities, facilitating the adoption of broadband by covered populations, implementing training programs, making available equipment, networking capability, hardware and software, and then constructing, upgrading, expanding, or operating new or existing public access computing centers. So a lot of funding is coming in the works, a really exciting time in the space of broadband. And of course, we want to encourage and promote anyone who can apply to apply, whether it's through the capacity or the competitive program. Localities, if you can hear, apply for the Affordability and Adoption Planning Grant. But yeah, so these are our 3 programs. And then here's just an overview. Like I said, the DSLD program is still in program development, but we're hoping that we can start the application process within the end of the calendar year, winter 2024, or early in 2025. And then the maximum, the period of performance would be 4 years implementation and then 1 year of evaluation. So yeah, if you guys have any questions.
Are there questions? Delegate
Thanks. The last one, the 1.25 billion, that's for the whole country.
That's for the whole country. It's a competition.
Yes.
And we could get affordable.
Yeah, so we have an allocation, and so we do know that there's some entities that we're providing TA to that are actually going to apply directly for that pot because it's open right now. And so we're providing TA and offering them some assistance as they prepare the application. And also really just helping folks determine how they're going to meet that match requirement. I don't think we all knew that there was going to be a match requirement for their funding, and so we're trying to help identify some innovative ways that our partners, whether it's our libraries or local nonprofits, with being competitive. It is a competitive program.
I have a follow-up question on affordability. So I was parking, some of them listed there already covered. I apologize, but I was wondering, I know there's a program. I had someone from Comcast come from Hong Kong. They talked the first time some of my constituents heard about the $30 for the month program. Is that type of program part of this whole umbrella, the affordability? Because that's one of my things is we went to a lot of rural areas, but we keep hearing, Greg, you're going to bring broadband.
So I think if I could, Madam Chair, I think it's important to kind of understand the affordability piece is baked in different areas. Okay, so the BEAD program has its own approach to low cost, and then you'll see these other programs that might be able to help with affordability. I think the big picture, now that I think we're about to turn the fire hose off, the big picture is that we've gone from the discussion of hardware, putting broadband where it's not, okay, but needed, softer to the what are we going to do once we have it? How do we get it deployed? How do we facilitate people to use this, because it's an important technology. We could all wax poetic on what it can do for business, for health, for education, all this. And once, and it's exciting to be at this point because we are moving from that hardware focus to how can we make Virginia better using this tool?
And I just have a question because I know you were talking about the affordability programs through the federal government that had been
The ACP.
Just expired. There isn't a chance that they might renew that at the federal level, or is that completely off the table?
We've seen proposals, but it's really up to Congress what they're going to determine to do around that program. There is still the Lifeline program, which is a smaller subsidy program. It's about almost $10 a month that folks that are eligible can apply for to help towards their internet bill. I have no idea how that program works. I don't know if any of the providers participate in that here, but my understanding is very similar to the ACP program where folks would get the subsidy directly. It is directly through the FCC though.
I have a follow-up. That's great to be as a dual approach. The question is, you know, if I'm a provider, I bid and get this, I get you a couple of counties, all the red dots are now green. Did I have a requirement as part of the bid?
Oh, well,
If I'm a provider, that I need
Yes.
to provide
Yes.
affordable
Yes.
broadband. And not
to
just
eligible
put
populations.
the hardware,
Yes.
turn the switches on.
No, no.
Right,
and
you wanna-
and the senator, yeah, the senator's question was, is there a requirement, is there an affordability piece requirement in the applications? The very statute itself calls for, requires providers, they have to have what's called a low cost service. Okay. And so, that's a requirement in the application. And Virginia has in its initial proposal, has laid out how we're going to approach that. Different states are doing it differently, but how we're going to do that. And so, but yeah, the short answer to your question is yes, that it's got to be in every application.
All right, and move on to the next piece, that'd be. So we have Chris Glover, the Assistant Director for IT of the Central Rappahannock Regional Library. He's going to do the next presentation. Thank you for hosting us today. We appreciate your hospitality.
Thank you so much for being here today, and I welcome you to the library. We're really, really glad to have you, and thank you to the Library of Virginia for inviting me to talk to you a little bit about how libraries fit into this picture. There are slides behind you. I'm afraid we don't have them in your packet. But what I want to talk about to you today, I am a tech guy, I will admit. I worked in software in the 80s and 90s, and then decided to come back to the library in the mid 90s. And I love fiber and numbers and those kinds of things. But what I really want to talk to you about today is what was mentioned earlier, which is kind of, you'd have all the fiber and technology you want in the world, but if people don't understand how to use it, don't know what it's for, what good does that do you? So I want to talk about how libraries fit into that picture, because libraries have been helping people figure out how to use information for a very, very long time. And we have been really right there at the forefront of technology as it has developed. There's a slide on the screen that shows a bookmobile, and when we started this system in the early 70s, the bookmobile was broadband, because we took information out to 150 square miles of our service area and taught people how to use it, how to request information from other places, kind of how to get to all of that. So librarians have been doing this really for quite a long time. For us in the 80s, we got into providing digital services through modems. And that was broadband at the time. The Library of Virginia provided access to indexes that we could call into and use. And our librarians at that point started to help all of our customers in our service area kind of understand, okay, there is now information that's not just in books, it's outside. How do we get to it? How can you use it? We actually, in the late 80s, we moved to an online catalog, and we set up a bank of modems for people to call in. They could call in, find out what was in our catalog, and start using those services. So then when we got into the 90s, that's when really libraries dove into broadband in a big way. our library, which at that point was headquartered out of this building, we got a T1 connection, which was 1.54 megabits, blazingly fast at the time. And we also got a server and provided a website. We provided websites for the city of Fredericksburg, for the Rappahannock United Way. We basically built out the web infrastructure for this service area. But in order to use that, the librarians in our system had to train people how to deal with that, because this was brand new. People didn't know how to use it. So we were training people at that point how to use a PC, how to use the early links text-based web browser, the other online services like bulletin boards, the things that were kind of developing in the 90s. And at that point, there was no Google. So we were teaching people how to find things, how to use them. And then in the 2000s, we actually were one of the libraries that got the Gates Foundation money, and we started adding lots of public computers to our branches. The other thing, obviously, that happened then was we suddenly needed a lot more bandwidth at our branches than a fractional T1 or a T1. So we actually were able to work with the state of Virginia, which had a program at that point called Network Virginia, which provided broadband access to government facilities throughout the state. That was critical to us. It allowed us to get actual higher bandwidth connections. And we also applied to E-rate the very first year that it was available from the federal government. We've been using E-rate every year now since 1999, I think it was. Of course, with lots of people coming in to use those resources, the library had to show people, all right, how do we do this? How do we navigate this new thing called the web? How do we use Google to find information? And librarians have always been really key in kind of holding people's hands to get through that process. So as we kind of developed, and we also offered public Wi-Fi for the first time in the early 2000s, which obviously led to a different set of bandwidth issues for the library. From 2010 to 2020, we made a big move into cloud-based computing, which obviously is another bandwidth-intensive thing. All of our public computers moved to Chrome OS, which is an operating system that operates out of the cloud. We got a hosted online catalog and website and moved everybody to that. And then at that point, with the help of E-rate, we did kind of finally get to really serious broadband gigabit connections at all of our branches, including our small libraries down in Westmoreland County. And things sort of shifted in terms of what the librarians needed to do. They started to have to actually help people figure out how to get to all of these things, not from the library, but from their homes. So we offered e-materials, e-books, e-magazines, e-audio, and movies. And so the librarians were helping people bring their own devices in and figure out how to get that. One of the things that happens every year at the library is right after Christmas, everyone gets a new device. And people come into the library and say, I have this tablet. Yeah, that also happens definitely. That's a little bit more of a challenge because they'll bring in a 6-year-old device and say, how do I watch movies on this? But they'll bring them into the library, and it's really the librarian's job to show them how to connect to the internet, how to get those services, what those things can actually do for them. Because in a lot of cases, it's just a piece of hardware. They don't know what it can do for them. So we spend a lot of time training people how to get the information out of the services that are provided. And then, of course, at the end of that decade, the pandemic came along. Because we were online, because E-rate and the state had been able to get us these higher speed internet services, we were really well positioned to weather that. We provided online services throughout the pandemic from day one. Even though our buildings were closed, we were able to get people online using ebooks, using e-audio books. And because we had moved online, we were able to help people using email and chat and even our voice over IP phone system, so people the librarians could take calls from their houses to help people kind of figure out how to do the things they suddenly needed to do that they hadn't needed to do before. So we really have kind of been there at each step along the way to help people figure out how to use these technologies. And we help everybody. We help people from one end of the spectrum to the other. We have lots of people who maybe are in this country for the first time. They come to the library and say, how can I get these services? So since then, since the end of the pandemic, what we have found is that people are still using many of those services. They didn't go away. Our ebook circulation has gone through the roof. And we also, during the pandemic, we began to circulate hotspots, as we've talked about here. I think we have about 100 out in circulation now, and many people waiting to get their hands on them. We also circulate laptops so that people can take a laptop and a hotspot if they're in an area that doesn't have good service, or if they are in an area that perhaps it does have good service, but they can't afford that service. So we've just kind of been there at every step of the way to help people navigate what these changes bring, find out how to get information, find out how to use all of these wonderful services that you guys are in the business of providing to them. So we really look forward to continuing to do that in association with the state library. And thank you again for having us here and having your meeting here. And I'm a Fredericksburg native, so if you have any questions about Fredericksburg when we're done, I'll be around.
Thank you so much, Mr. Glover. That was really informative. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Anyone in the committee have any questions? Yes, all righty. Next, we have our opportunity for the public to give us comments. I know that Chandler may have a list.
Yes, and as for the folks who may not be able to hear online, and we actually have a question from a council member online. Senator Hashmi, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question.
Well, thank you so much. And the presentations have all been just remarkable and exciting today. I'm really very thrilled with the work that our public libraries are doing. And a lot of this information was new to me. I'm curious how we can help our libraries to spread the word about the resources that are available, and anything we can do to promote it in our districts and with our constituents. I'd be happy to learn more about how we can share the word on these resources.
Well, I will certainly say just communicating with your library, reaching out and finding out what resources they have. My experience is that libraries are very good at producing lots of services, but somewhat less good at promoting them. So I think if you would like to speak with your libraries, they would be happy to give you that information. And I will say many of these grants that we're working with, the grantors have lots of information about what services we have. And I don't know if the state librarian has anything more. All right. Well, thank you very much. Any more questions? Yes.
So we know it may not be applicable here, but we know of libraries that facilitate telehealth. Some of the areas we visited, people may not have the connection, but they're desperate for telehealth. Doctor can do it, they can do it. Would they be able to come and have a room, or is that something that you're?
Yes. The question was, do libraries provide basically a space and services to people who don't have that kind of opportunity at their business or their home? And the answer is for telehealth. And the answer is absolutely. In fact, our system recently was participated in a grant project that put booths in the libraries where people can come in. They can book the booth in advance so that they have it at the time of their appointment and come in. We provide Wi-Fi access. We provide a laptop so that they can do that. And we provide assistance if they need assistance kind of getting connected. So I think most all of the libraries in the state of Virginia do have meeting rooms and study rooms available, and with Wi-Fi and those kinds of services. So we absolutely do that.
One of the things I learned in Kentucky, in CSL, there were some best practices shown for the booths in even in Kentucky. Like, there's one particular here. Thanks.
And Senator, I will say, as part of when Chandler presented on the non-deployment pieces earlier, he talked about the non-deployment efforts that in conversations we're having with state agencies. And so telehealth and telemedicine are one of the pieces that we're having conversations on. As shared earlier, the libraries have dedicated space for folks to have, be able to do job interviews and telehealth visits. We heard from Cindy in one of our conversations with the Library of Virginia, their pods, booths.
Yes, I was, sorry, I didn't step up from it. Delegate Willett, I was really keyed into what you said because we took some ARPA funds and bought privacy pods for the public library. So they could do things like have their doctor's appointment. But I think even more important is the librarians are there to help them navigate, to build that digital, to get the digital literacy gap narrowed, because they come in. I was in the, everybody needs a patient portal now. I was in a doctor's office with my husband not too long ago, and somebody said, I don't do that because I don't trust it. So, but that's the way things are going now. So libraries are very key in that process.
Thanks.
Great.
Yes.
Yes.
Just got a comment on that. I was actually making a note on that for my rural health committee, because I had not connected those dots. It makes complete sense with what you're describing, but this is a great resource. So
we're working on a survey right now with DHCD for funding future and to get equipment as well as purchase more hotspots for the other.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. If we have no other questions, then public comments. Chandler, do you like to?
Yes, Madam Chair, for public comment, we've had one individual sign up. Please excuse any mispronunciation of name. EJ Scott, public comment. I'll bring the computer over to you so we can hear you well.
Wonderful to hear all of the information that I've been part of one of these committees for many years. One of the state committees, and I know that if from 2008 until just this year, we had 3 people 3 times when people came and signed up to be on to speak in the public comment. And so I know that it doesn't really go into the record unless it's on there. So I wanted to ask a few questions, and let's see. So I'll start here. I'm EJ Scott. I am the chair of the Virginia NAACP Economic Justice thing. So I'm here to ensure that how we're going, and if we're addressing the equity piece of this particular project. And so I want to start with you. I was saying that you did a number of surveys, and I was wondering, do we have any demographics for that survey?
Over to the computer to answer your question. And so yes, we, as required under the digital equity funding from NTIA, each state had to develop a digital equity plan. Ours was called the Commonwealth Digital Opportunity Plan. And so I will share with you before we leave the link to our actual plan in the report. And so that particular funding focuses on, you heard Kayla say the words covered populations. And so as there's a host of different folks that qualify under that bucket for NTIA, it is a federal definition. It's members of racial and ethnic minorities. It's people that live in rural communities, incarcerated persons, veterans. 81.1% of Virginians check one or more of those boxes. And so I will definitely, before we leave, provide you a link to our plan. It does provide the survey data by demographics. And if the public report doesn't slice it the way you need it, we can actually provide that information as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Again, do we have demographics on actually the grantors, the people who were given the money to provide?
So we were just getting the money. And so we will have to collect that information as part of our grants that we will distribute. And so the planning funds allowed us to find out where everyone is, what are the needs around the equity piece. And so the $18 million that we talked about earlier, we'll have to collect that information as part of that funding.
I've been doing IT almost as long as the other gentleman has as well. So
yes, ma'am.
Okay. The other question that I have is, you mentioned that there was a provision in the contracts that required low-cost services. Are there parameters set for low cost? Because what might be low cost to me might not be low cost to you. So
it's a great question. Our volume 2 just got approved, outlines that a provider under BEAD has to offer a low-cost option to folks that would have qualified under the parameters of the Affordable Connectivity Program. Those providers have to set that low-cost option between under $75 for families in that area, and then we're looking at ways to see if we can address affordability further under BEAD non-deployment dollars.
thank you. And I hope this is my last question, but as we're talking about equity and reaching those who are underserved, oftentimes we run into, shall I say, substandard housing, and the electrical connections might not be sufficient in order to do broadband. Is there a part of this that addresses that type of situation?
So I don't know if I have an answer specifically to that question. I probably will. Okay, thank you. Brian, I'm going to bring the laptop to you so that our friends online can hear you. And I'm assuming you all heard the question around the quality of the connection to the in the home once it's there.
Exactly. All right. So kind of a two-part answer. Okay. The broadband funds, especially, and remember, especially BEAD, those are federal funds. Federal government's going to look at these applications and decide. Okay. And so like the Appalachian Regional Commission or Southeast Crescent, applications will come in, they'll get scored. The governor will recommend, and that's our final proposal, the governor will recommend up to the federal agency. Federal agency make those choices, okay? Number two, those monies are tied at broadband. Now, with respect to systems in the home, okay, whether it's electrical, plumbing, water, what have you, our department, the Department of Housing and Community Development, has programs to help do things like weatherize, and may well have a program to kind of help with those sorts of the internal house infrastructure. So while the broadband money per se is being aimed at this hardware and then later soft things like adoption and affordability, only just to contrast the type of wares, the state government already has some programs to kind of address that just generally, unrelated broadband. So I'd be happy to share information on those programs with you too after. Yes.
Appreciate you. Are there other questions? Okay. Well, EJ, thank you for taking the time to come. We appreciate it. And I hope you heard in the questioning if nonprofits would have the ability to apply for some of these. Yeah, absolutely. But I do not believe we have any more business in front of us today. So if I have yes.
I did have a follow-up, and so Chandler, you guys know what the question's going to be, but it really relates to, I've mentioned this a few times and still a concern, I think, when it comes to deployment, is cellular deployment. And whether any of these funds can be, through the NTIA funds, can be used to help us increase cellular deployment. So as an example, I'm from Franklin County. We may very well be to a point where we have fiber to every house. But if you walk out to your garden, you can't make a cell phone call. So if you need to call public safety, or if you're out on your farm tractor and something happens, or just your tractor needs internet access through cellular, a couple examples like that. We still have areas, and I know there's many areas around the state where cellular coverage is still lacking to provide access to those hotspots that were mentioned several times earlier. So I know it's something that the staff has looked at some, but I would appreciate if you guys could share maybe some insight on that or any ideas. And potentially, if body funds in the future could go towards potentially helping increase access to cellular networks as well.
I think the first part, okay. Body is state general funds. And so if the budget lets it do it, the budget lets it do it. However, Doc, you have something to share?
And so I shared with Steve last night, Chandler and I did a presentation. Oh gosh, I really feel like I'm speaking to the laptop. And so is that your state issue one? And so we had that, so we heard NTIA say that publicly. And so we are waiting guidance from NTIA whether under non-deployment is cellular eligible use of the funds. Ultimately, it is at the will of the governor and the General Assembly how we spend the non-deployment portion of the funds. And so they have said it, they've not put it in writing. And so as we all know, until the federal government puts something in writing, I don't trust it very much. I think you all know that enough. And so, because they say a lot of stuff. And so we're currently waiting to see if there's additional guidance around that. And we will definitely provide an update to the members of the council, depending on what else they come out regarding that. Several states have asked about that.
And just maybe a plug to our General Assembly members as we move forward with body, this may be one area where that funding, if it's not available through the federal government, may be a way to continue to promote access throughout the Commonwealth.
And I appreciate that question. I represent the northern portion of Fairfax County, and I have constituents here that have problem where they cannot they can't communicate with their cell phones at their house, which is a challenge for them. So, yeah. Any other business that has not been addressed today? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All righty. Thank you. We will rise. Appreciate you all for coming.